Oh yeah, sexy biscuits. Nice.
Long was 1975. A YouTuber on the rise. Reviewing games late at night and sometimes friends. But Long was 1975.
Hey YouTube, Long Post 1975, and welcome to a vlog. I haven't done a vlog in ages, unless you kind of count parts of my Fat Friday videos a vlog, which most people don't, so I'll shut up now. Welcome to the ticking clock room. And I just realised, because I haven't vlogged in this room in ages, that none of the clocks are ticking. Which means this is a really shit impression to the start of Back to the Future. Anyway, what do I want to talk about? Well, you already know, it's in the title. But basically, at work last night, at lunch, I was checking my comment section on YouTube, and obviously you get comments. Anyone who does a YouTube channel knows that sometimes you get comments on videos going back absolutely years and years. They're quite infrequent and stuff like that, but you still get them. And yeah, I got one, and I was talking about trades and stuff like that. You know, mistakes I made, and very briefly, because that wasn't the topic of the video. And I talked about how I traded my Japanese copy of Rambo 3 for the Mega Drive, obviously, because I mean the system. One of those companies where they would, swap it for a game of equivalent value, and I got the Japanese copy of Space Harrier 2, and I always regretted it. But other than that, I've never really done or had a bad trade, which was what this person left in the comments section. Would help if I said that bit first, wouldn't it? Which is, hey Dave, what's the trade you regret the most? Well, I want to talk about a trade that I don't regret at all, and the reason I've never really talked about it, I haven't remembered it that much before, is because it wasn't a permanent trade. It was a swapsy. Basically, it was a loan, like when you used to lend tapes or games, only it was with systems. And so the fact that I never ever, it was never ever going to be permanent, I got my system back, which will make, more sense about like how on paper, how stupid this is on paper when we get to the timing of, when this swap took place. But yeah, it was it's not regret or anything like that. It works out really rather quite well and helped bolster my love for the Atari 2600. But basically, right, in early 1989, that's when I got my Japanese Megadrive. Everyone knows that. That's the birth of this YouTube channel. I saved, and I saved some more, sold my Master System, imported a Japanese Megadrive. We were lucky back then because there were import shops. Basically, the in-shops had this little kiosk in it that sold Japanese Megadrive games, amongst many other things. So I could actually buy games in the high street as well as buying them out with black and whites in such magazines as Mean Machines and I forget your name, CVG. You were royalty back in the day. I had a decent collection of games and stuff like that, and the prices were reasonable when you used to go into the high street. They were $34.99, $29.99, sometimes they were $19.99 for stuff like Herzog Zwei or Herzog Ziwi, as my mate calls it, but he's just wrong. But the point is, so it was early 1989, and why this is a big deal, this swap, right, is on paper it makes me look like a fool. The other person got an amazing deal, because the Mega Drive didn't get released officially, in the UK until 1990. So we're like a year or so ahead. And I was royalty at school. Everyone knew, I've talked about this before, everyone knew that I had a Japanese Mega Drive. I was pretty much the only person who had a Japanese Mega Drive for months and months until some kid whose parents had divorced, so he used to play them off against each other because he was a dick, called Mark Houghton. If you're watching, hi Mark Houghton, you were a dick for doing that. And so they spoiled the shit out of him, and then he got a Japanese Mega Drive because he wanted to steal some of my thunder. Although I can't stay mad at him because he did help me get an imported Super Famicom. Anyway, so I had the kids in my form. They had like Amigas and stuff like that, and Atari STs. But my brother had an Amiga and he had an Atari ST. Concurrently, not both at the same time, because we weren't rich. Why do you think I bought my own Mega Drive, Mark Houghton? If that is your real name, it is his real name. But So we were gonna. It was like, was it? I can't remember. It was so. It would have been like spring or something. So it would have been Whitsun week. But we were going down our chalet, which is in West October, that amazing arcade. I always go on about where best arcade of my childhood, best arcade I've ever been in anywhere. Period in my life. Obviously it doesn't exist now, so that's an irrelevant statement. But yeah, so we were going on holiday for a week, and he asked if he could borrow my Japanese Megadrive, and I was like, please, no. Going to take it with me. There was only one TV there, but I was going to take it with me and we were going to play it. And I said, well, what have you got? And he had an Atari 2600. And that appealed to me. Even my twin brother at the time and my older brother were like, 'cause they knew how much effort and work I put into in saving for my Japanese Megadrive. I thought this was a very, very odd deal. It wasn't an odd deal in the sense that it was risky, because it wasn't risky, because this was a kid who was in my form and he was in my inner circle of friends. He was one of like, there was a group of us and he was one of those groups. You all had that group of friends at secondary school, don't you? You know what one's like? I wouldn't go as far to say a gang, because that sounds stupid. But yeah, so there was no risk or anything like that. But yeah, his name was James Elms. Now, don't you love the way that nicknames got dished out at school? So we called him Elmer, and then eventually it was refined to just Fudd. Think about it. Isn't that the best name ever? So yeah, so he said, I got Atari 2600 and I got like 30 games, 2 joystick paddles and stuff like that. My uncle gave it to me. And the thing is, you're thinking, so wait, hang on a minute, Dave. Well, it's in the title. You're going to swap your Japanese Megadrive that wasn't even available in the UK at the moment for an Atari 2600 for a week. So, like I said, bear in mind, I'm getting it back, and there was no risk whatsoever. And at this point, I only had like 5 games. I had Rastan Saga 2 because they shafted me on Batman. That was the one I was supposed to get with the system. I had Forgotten Worlds. I'm trying to think like what I had right at the start. Like all eSWATs, all really, really early games. I mean, good games, especially considering the 8-bits and stuff like that, and the fact that we had a Spectrum, and obviously I'd just come off a Master System. But you could argue, right? Only 5 games, he had that many games, so this appealed to me. But the other reason it appealed to me was, obviously when I was like saving up for my Master System, I am aware I'm going back a system. Right, I started buying, CVG and Mean Machines. Obviously, Mean Machines started in a couple of pages inside CVG, and then it became its own magazine and stuff like that. I already had my Mega Drive though when it became its own magazine. So mainly CVG. Basically, I started getting nostalgia and started, getting into consoles. And obviously, I wanted a Master System. Then obviously, I became obsessed. Sega fanboy, wanted a Mega Drive. But then it was the complete guide to consoles. I had all 3 of them. Why did I throw those books out? I think they're worth a fortune now. I don't know why they don't reprint them in hardback or like a collected, version or something like that. They should get on that. Get on that CVG, even though I'm pretty sure you don't exist anymore. But hey, Crash came back, so did Zap 64, so get on that CVG. And I used to obsess over the front of the first one, which I believe was the yellow one. Every console that was out or coming out, I mean, he even reviewed the Conix, didn't they, which never got released, and that chair. But so, it had NES, Masters and stuff like that, gave you the number of sound channels and things like this, sprites on screen, stuff like that. And so the Atari 2600 was in there because it's console royalty, even though you could argue in the late 80s, the thing was around to like 92, wasn't it? I remember seeing it in club books as a kid when the Master System and Mega Drive were out, and you could buy it for like 39 quid with 50 games on one cartridge. So it hung in there. It hung in there like a stain. But the point is, I knew the importance of it, and that it was console royalty because it created the modern era of the console. I know there are other ones, but ultimately Atari, more so like the VCS before it became 2600, kicked it off, didn't it? Absolutely kicked it off. So I wanted to play it and I wanted to experience it, and and there were reviews for games on it, like very small ones in some of these magazines and stuff like that. So I wanted to experience it because up to this point, my only experience of it was, and I've talked about this story before, our neighbours who moved away when we were really young, but they were like friendly to us. It was 2 girls and they had a brother, and they had Atari 2600, and this was before we had a Spectrum, and we had some, I forget what it is, but it's a Pong machine, which I have the same one upstairs, so I should remember what it is, because I paid a lot of money to get that converted so it'll work on a fucking RGB TV. And now I don't own an RGB TV. I've only got a gaming monitor. First world problems. So they let it to us for a few days. So this is like literally very early 80s. It's before we had a Spectrum, which would have been 82, because we got the Spectrum in the launch year, quite early in the launch year. That was my only experience. So obviously since then, not just because of Mean Machines and stuff like that, the cultural impacted Atari 2600. It made it into movies, it made it into Daryl, it made it into E.T., made it into British TV, Chucky. Remember when Chucky Chucky possessed the kid and the kid fried, it was an alien called Chucky. That means nothing to you unless you're English, in which case I guarantee you know what I'm talking about just because of that. And so he was so good because he was possessed by this alien, he made the machine fry, but I'm pretty sure they probably stole that bit from the movie Daryl. The point is, and I remember on Tomorrow's World, they were showing this machine where you could take your Atari 2600 cartridges, plug it into this machine, and it would wipe the ROM and put a new one on there. And so, like, I knew what the Atari 2600 was, and particularly when I was slaving up for my Master System, more so this period than we had a Spectrum, which you could argue is a better machine than the 2600. Fight amongst yourselves. That so like, you know, in the Master System time and stuff like that, and Mega Drive time, I knew what it was. I really wanted to play it. So the fact that it had so many games, paddle controllers, joysticks and stuff like that, it was a junior. I do remember it was a junior. I said, fuck it, let's do this, because again, there was no risk, and I knew the guy, and he was a good guy, and he'd be taking care of it. And he did. But I'm not going to lie, I was a bit worried though on that Friday at school before we drove to, you know, Devon or Westford Home. Westwood over Devon? I want to say it's pretty much in Devon. He gave me it in a carrier bag. Literally all the games, there were loads of games, and all the controllers were dumped in a carrier bag. And I didn't give it to him in my box, because even back then, I was all about preserving boxes and stuff like that. You know, especially for, you know, your beloved Mega Drive, because you really did take care of this bad boy, because no one else had one. Other kids in my form were kind of like, why are you lending it to him? Why are you lending it to that? Because, like, you know, again, don't need your Amigas, don't need your Atari STs, got a Spectrum, had a Master System, have a friend up the road who owns a NES, no one else has a 2600, let's do this. So yeah, so I lent Fudd, my Mega Drive, with like 5 games. Can't remember what the other games were. Rastan Saga, Forgotten Worlds, no, got DJ Boy at Christmas, got Mercs at Christmas, Lenos? I don't know. I don't even know what was out in 1989 off the top of my head. But it's not about that. The point is he only got 5 games. So yeah, and so like I said, it was half-term or Whitsun week. I don't even know why it's called Whitsun week, even now as an adult. We went to Westwood Ho. The other thing was, because it was Westwood Ho with that amazing arcade, if this thing sucked, it was irrelevant. Because we had that amazing arcade on my doorstep, you know. And if I went there with 5 games, Golden Axe, I think, was one of them, went there with 5 games, yeah, then, you know, just how much can I play? So, like, again, crude games or not on the 2600, like, that many games. So, yeah, so it wasn't, like, again, on paper it sounds stupid. You you swapped someone a Mega Drive before it was out in this country for an Atari 2600. See? Sounds stupid on paper, but it's not, because, you know, the arcade, I never played it into consoles now, and had to experience Atari 2600. And yeah, so it rained really badly a couple of days, absolutely tanked down, because again, you're on holiday as well, so you want to go swimming, you want to play football, your parents take you out to all these places because we were there for a week. You aren't going there to sit inside, look at you kids these days, and just play video games all the time. So, you know, I was covered with stuff to do. But yeah, it rained, tanked down really badly a couple of days, and that's when me and my brothers went big time into this 2600. And I loved it. There were like 5 games I was completely obsessed with. And I knew, like, compared to the Spectrum, it was basic. But again, it was experience of 2600. But there were 5 games, and you could argue it was probably the licenses on them, you know, of what they were, you know, like comics based or stuff like that, that made them a big deal. But played paddle games, couldn't get them to work really rather well. There was like, he had like a generic boxing game, the top down one, that was pants. He had this horse racing game. For some reason, me and my twin brother Ian really rather quite like that. One of the ones I was obsessed with was Keystone Capers. To this day, I still love that game. And I think it does a pretty good job. I think it kind of, correct me if I'm wrong on this, maybe it isn't one of the games that does it, pushes the system a tad, if you will. So I love that, kind of like the horse racing game. There was a generic baseball game. There was a whole bunch of just generic games which you would expect on Atari. And some of these were really beaten up and bad and shit like that. He didn't have Pac-Man, but then I didn't know anything about Pac-Man or E.T. back then. Didn't have that. But he had a ton of games, and most of them were like just generic sport game, basketball game. But we went through them all and then settled down on these 5. So absolutely loved and obsessed over Keystone Capers. Empire Strikes Back. Now, remember what a big deal that was when that came out. Remember adverts on TV and in magazines and stuff like that when I was ickle. never ever ever got to play that. So even though that looked pants and gameplay wise was incredibly limited to all the shit, even just like the 5 games that I lent FUD, that was like a childhood dream come true. You know, years later, young adult, well not young adult, I'm fucking, what am I, 1989, 11? But the point being, when it was out the first time round, I was like 5 or something, could never ever ever play it, and it got, you know, exposure on TV and stuff like that, and really wanted to play it. We grilled the shit out of that. We absolutely grilled the shit out of that, like hours and hours and hours on the days where it rained. Then the other one that I'm absolutely obsessed with was Spider-Man, because at this point I'm reading American comics, I'm collecting American comics, I'm collecting and reading both Web of Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, and Spectacular Spider-Man. Spectacular Spider-Man, when it was drawn by Sal Buscema, rest in peace. I love that. I love that more than Amazing, even though my Amazing Spider-Man collection now, which has the entire run of Tom McFarlane, is like, you know, the beloved part of my collection. I was such a Spectacular Spider-Man fan, but the point is I love Spider-Man and loved it before the comics because of the cartoons and stuff like that. So sank hours of my life again into that game. Sank more hours into that, maybe again because it was raining, maybe again because this was the console that I had with me, than I did on some of my Mega Drive games that I lent to FUD. But yeah, I could never do it. I could never do it. And it made it like, when, you know, it's very old now, but when Angry Video Game Nerd did, you know, get to the top, get to the top, get to the top. Flashbacks of this moment, you know, every time I watch that, you know, video, I mean, I've got his early stuff on DVD, you know, it's good stuff, because he was a new thing back then. Yeah, it was, yeah, that just, you know, resonated with me, absolutely resonated with me. Couldn't beat it, but my God, did I sink some time into it. Then he had Jedi, was it Power Arena? Or Arena Battles or something like that? We had, you know, paddles, couldn't get that fucker to work. Just could not get that fucker to work. Pitfall, which we had a version on the Spectrum, but this was better than the version on the Spectrum. Yeah, sank loads and loads and loads of time into that. And then there was one more, or was it 2? I've lost count. What one was it? It was another, is it? Oh, the top-down plane game where you collect fuel. River Raid. But the point being, for this week, mainly on these 2 days where it absolutely tanked down. I mean, we dove in and out other days as well, but not to the extent we did on these days. And I guess my parents were grateful that we had something to kill time for us, because otherwise we'd go up the arcade and they'd have to give us money. But loved it. Really, really, really enjoyed it. I was really glad that, like, I kind of got playing, you know, having access to a decent amount of the library to form an opinion of the system. And basically, this might sound a bit strong a descriptive term, knock in, playing and, you know, and experiencing a 2600 firsthand properly off my bucket list, because, like, you know, I said earlier on this video, you know, what a big deal it was, you know, in the history of consoles, now that I was a console boy, and obviously more so when I bought the Master System, and then, like, you looked up everything via magazines, obviously no internet. Good days, living through magazines. Miss those days. I am aware that magazines still exist, but you know what I mean. So yeah, it was just, you know, scratching that itch, if it makes sense. And then the week ended, and then the following Monday when we went to school, we swapped back, got my Mega Drive back. Not gonna lie, I was really happy to get it back. Again, didn't doubt him, you know, not trust him or anything like that, because he was in my inner circle and Bud took care of shit. Otherwise, I wouldn't have lent it to someone I knew who had a reputation for not taking care of other people's shit. Because you used to lend videos, didn't you? Videotapes and stuff like that. Big difference between a videotape, I am aware of that, and video game console. But he always looked after my copy of A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 Dream Warriors, so, you know, kudos for that. Yeah, so I got it back. So the thing is, other people in my class, both my brothers, I think my parents were probably, I think they knew that the Atari 2600 certainly wasn't worth what my Mega Drive was worth, just because it would be in catalogues and stuff like that. And they obviously knew that, not knowing what exactly a Mega Drive was, that it was brand new, and that the fact that I had to get it from Japan, so it was imported, was kind of a big deal. And that, you know, but like I said, no, I trust him. Plus they would have just phoned his parents up probably behind the books and say, right, are you cool with this, blah 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 blah. Because let's be honest, whenever you made big trades and swaps at school, more often than not, what you thought you were being all grown up and shit like this and arranging all this stuff, your parents probably knew about it, probably fucking called the other people, didn't they? But the point is, on paper, stupid trade, yeah, stupid trade. parents probably thought it was weird. Both my brothers did think it was weird. Kids in the class thought it was weird, but that might be a little bit of jealousy because they were like, as much as like the Amiga kids and stuff like that were like, yeah, my Amiga's better than your Mega Drive. No, it's not. We've had this argument many, many times, Lee Helen. Stop living vicariously through Matthew Watson's Amiga because you don't own one, and bragging about someone else's machine being better than my machine that I own, that I save for by myself, by the way, that's pretty fucking sad. But yeah, so there probably would have been some jealousy in there. But yeah, like I said, so it's not really answering this person's question. Just realised that my camera's on the piss. Apologies. Bit late to do anything about that now. Doesn't really answer this person's question, but it does, like I said, on paper look like a really stupid trade, but the sting was taken out of it because it wasn't permanent. Anyway, this kind of got away from me. Been a while since I've done a vlog. Do plan on doing some more vlogs. It's summer, so I've got, I'm going to be spending time in the house a lot because I fucking hate summer. I fucking hate the sun. Anyway, I'd love to know what you think, especially if you ever actually made a trade like this. Not just a game, but I mean game trades you probably, or you regretted. I'd love to know what those are. But if you ever actually traded a system, whether it was a loan or it was permanent, love to know what you think. And whether you think this was stupid on paper, even though I got it back. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you later.